There you go.
Bill says he can be here in about 10 minutes. Still working.
Okay, it's up to you if you wanna wait or not.
I don't want him to miss this explanation, because then we're gonna have to go through it all again.
Right, and Phil has thoughts on borrowing any money, so it might be good to have his opinion here.
I'm thinking too.
Can you go to a second one before you go to first and second?
I think the first one, okay.
Okay. Can we do all personnel and?
No,
You can't skip around them.
We're gonna call the finance meeting to order. I have 307 up on the wall, call it what you want. First up, discussion and possible motion, number one, initial resolution authorizing not to exceed 500,000 taxable general obligation promissory notes. Can you explain that one, Jamie?
Yep. So, as you know, we've been really struggling to try to get our budget balance for next year. And part of that is because we have some very high placement costs with HHS. And if you'd like further explanation, Jeremy's here, I'm sure he'd be happy to explain that. They're mandated, they're out of our control, and so I kind of wanted to start off by giving a little background on levy limits. I'm not sure if you guys are all aware of how those work, and I'm sure there's a lot that I don't know about it, but back in 2005, levy limits were imposed on Wisconsin counties and municipalities. So that was amended in 2011, where the limits could be increased by the equalized value only of net new construction. So while the equalized value of the properties in our county have gone up since 2005, the only way our levy can increase is by that net new construction. So in order to be able to afford to build roads and, you know, provide building improvements, we are able to issue general obligation debt, which goes above our operating levy limit, so that our levy put onto the taxpayers in any given year can be increased by the debt service payments that are due in that year. And our debt service limits are limited to 5% of our equalized value. So our levy limit is right around $95 million, or for debt service. So we recently were given some advice from another county that you are able to borrow for operating costs when they are related to court orders or judgments, as well as insurance premiums. And what we really like to focus on is the court orders and judgments. Some of you have this. I went onto the Department of Revenue website and was able to find this kind of neat report that shows basically this is kind of that middle column, the payable, adjusted, actual county levy. Our 2023 amount for Rusk County was $5,909,947. I looked back as far as I could, and as far as I could go is back to 2010. It's on the back side of there. The limit then was $5,291,451. So in 13 years, our operating levy only increased by 11.69%. And this isn't meant to just cover wages. This covers all of the county's operating costs. So if our electric bills have gone up by that much, that eats that up. So, we've had to utilize that debt service levy in order to be able to pave roads, we did some upgrades at the fairgrounds. The new animal shelter was built with debt service dollars. Some of the joint management buildings had debt service outstanding on them. So that's how we could afford to do those improvements. And when we have operating costs that increase drastically year over year because we have court ordered placements, our operating levy can't sustain that. And we do have fund balance, yes, but cutting into our savings when we don't necessarily know if and when there'll be an end to these, if it's a one-time thing, then we can temporarily increase our levy to cover those costs. So what we're proposing is issuing $500,000 of general obligation promissory notes to cover some of those placement costs for 2025. So then, that would reduce the burden on our existing operating levy to where we wouldn't have to be looking at attrition so much. So, the idea is that we would issue debt in November or December through a bank loan and pay it off right away in January, February. It would be up to a 3-month note, just so that we can increase our debt service levy and not have to cut into our operating levy and look at possible position cuts, that sort of thing, as strongly as we didn't have this as an option.
Should that number be more?
It could be. We don't necessarily know. Jeremy is doing everything in his power to keep these costs as low as possible. Unfortunately, not all attempts are successful, and we might have to go back to those higher class placements. And we also are considerate of, putting this onto the tax levy because it will increase taxes, not by a significant amount, but we want to be mindful of that as well.
I'm gonna iterate or make something clear here right on the beginning. No disrespect to anyone, but right now this is just a finance meeting. So finance needs to decide where we're gonna go with this before we bring personnel in on the joint side. So this has to be decided by finance. And then we'll decide if we need to take anything into a joint meeting with personnel. So one of the options that was explained to me, if we were to do this, and correct me if I'm wrong, Jamie, if we were to do this $500,000 note, we're at 1.65 right now, out of balance. That would leave us 1.15. If we made no other changes and decided to pull that 1.15 from general fund, we're done. If there's other changes we want to make, or if we think that possibly put anything in for any other options, then we're gonna have to allow for that here somewhere while we're doing this. Correct? put any more in contingency? You wanna put anything set aside for wage increase? It's gonna have to go on top of the 1.15 if we do the $500,000 note. So any other options where we'd have to come into joint with personnel would be to furlough days, look at positions, look at hours, those options. That all make sense?
I did talk to a few banks today, about the feasibility of this and to get rates, and I'd rather not share the rates at this point because I'm still waiting on one back from another bank, and so I just don't wanna share what's been quoted until I get that. But, you know, getting it done yet this year is not an issue. They said it's a fairly, easy process, so. I just wanted to, you know, talk to you and get at least 3 different quotes so that I knew it's.
Yeah, I would agree we should not be sharing rates at this point if you're waiting back in.
But I would, you know, if you guys, decide to forward this on to county board, I would have that information to present at county board, and we would at that point need to award it to one of the banks.
So, just based on this, what is in contingency then?
Right now, we have 200,000 in there for general contingency in the budget.
At the last meeting, our last meeting, you said that it would be about another 250 to fund the wage increases as a first year, correct?
Well, we don't have anything necessarily, you know, but if we did a, you know, 1 step and 2%, that's approximately what we
Which would be 450 that we would need in contingency.
Yes, correct. So, but we already have 200 built in,
Right,
so.
Which isn't a lot.
no. And typically we have how much in the contingency yearly?
Depends on what we need to budget a contingency for. This year we have the health insurance increases built into the individual budgets. So the last few years we have put 200,000 in for general contingency, but we were thinking that maybe we would want more in there for 2025 because we did ask the departments to cut even more from their budgets than they had initially proposed. So we kind of wanted to have a little bit more contingency for that reason.
So you mentioned if we borrowed this, we would pay it back in January, just when the first half taxes and that came in, is that?
It's not really a cash flow issue. It's in order to put it on as debt service levy so that we can increase that debt service levy. That's why we would have to borrow it and pay it off. We can't just.
Okay. So what is our total fund balance?
At the end of 2023, it was just, our unassigned general fund balance was just under 17 million. We are, based on the projections that were provided to us during the budget process, it looks like we will be over budget by just over 900,000, and we had budgeted to use, we had budgeted to use 2.2 million, so, we would be under 14 million. If those projections are correct.
Touching it going into 20.
Correct. So we do have a very healthy general fund balance. It's that if we choose not to borrow this money now, we are, you know, it's coming out of our savings, out of our general fund. So it's not like we can decide to borrow for double that next year unless we truly have the costs for 2026.
So how does this 500 compare to the mandated out-of-county placements? I can't remember.
Jeremy?
I know I've got it on a.
We were kind of just ballparking it with that 500,000.
I'm sorry, what was the question?
So he's saying, how does the 500,000 compare to what the out-of-home placement costs are?
I'd have to get you an exact number. There's, right now, just in children and family, we have 16 kids in out-of-home placement, but 2 of them are the most expensive, and then 1 in adult services. And so those are $20,000 a month placements, those 3 each. And so if you take that look,
$720
Yeah.
a year.
Yes.
however, there's movement on at least one of those to lesser restricted.
And there may be some, depending on how other costs in those budgets shake out, there could be some grant funding available to help assist with those costs. And Jeremy will speak better on this, but they have their budget for each of their programs. And in some of those programs, they're entirely grant funded. In other programs, it's subsidized by levy because the grant funding isn't sufficient to cover it, or there may be matching requirements.
Okay. Thanks.
Now, this can only be used for HHS related issues, or what else can?
The way we wrote the resolution is that it can be used for any of the items as outlined in, within the allowable operating, debt service, but ideally we would be using it primarily for those out-of-home placements, but it can also be applied for, insurance and premiums. So, say, we end up with only $400,000 of those costs being, utilizing this loan for, the other 100,000 could be applied towards our insurance installments.
So,
What kind of insurance?
So it's for, liability insurance, property insurance, risk management services.
Not employee benefit.
Correct. So like, our property insurance, the vehicle insurance. So we have well over $300,000 a year in those. But obviously we have that every year. We have insurance premiums every year, but, the out-of-home placement costs will vary depending on,
and what type of capital, it says here, capital improvement plan projects, what? Very last line.
Oh, that's just out of the statutes. That's exactly how it's worded in the statutes.
But it can't be used for that.
It could be, yes, it could be, but this is,
But 500 is the max we can do on this?
on this particular, that amount could be changed, we just they put 500,000 in there as a placeholder.
So to help offset, so we can pull less out of general fund, is there a couple of the projects that we're doing that could be included in this?
Based on what's in the budget right now, no. We've already, moved, because we did issue bonds this year, we moved some of those costs, what we could, into the capital projects fund.
The fairgrounds project, that's covered? Some of that was coming out of levy, was it not?
No, that was not coming out of levy, that was coming out of, I believe you guys had, pushed that out. I think at the last finance meeting, we had decided to move that for a future year. And these would be, taxable notes, so they would be at a higher percentage, higher interest rate than non-taxable because of the purpose.
Is that more run along the lines of like a typical commercial loan?
Yes, closer to that, yes, because like if it's a tax exempt loan, the lender can write off, you know, the interest revenue they collect on that. It's not taxable for income tax purposes, but because this is not a tax exempt qualifying purpose, that interest would be taxable to the lenders.
Okay, so Jeremy just gave us a number of possibly 720. If those individuals stay, correct me if I'm wrong, Jeremy, if those individuals stay in that type of placement for 2025.
Correct, that would be a yearly cost for 3 of those style programs.
And what happens if, say in July, that everybody knows, he's able to, let's just say by luck, he's able to place those individuals. We don't have that burden anymore. This money goes into a fund?
It could, or we could use it up to offset up to our insurance premiums.
Okay, but you're not figuring anything in right now for that.
No, because I mean, and that's up to you guys to make that determination, but in my eyes, that's an ongoing operating cost that we're going to have every year regardless. The out-of-home placements is, yes, it's an operating cost, but it's variable.
What are the implications if we were to not borrow and just take it out of the fund balance?
Fund balance. Well, we would be significantly depleting our fund balance. You know, we're already planning on utilizing 3 million out of that fund balance by the end of this year. So when we go to issue long-term bonds, we have to be rated by the Standard & Poor's or some sort of bond rating agency. So they look at all kinds of information, whether it's economic data for the area, they look at our budgets, they look at our, you know, performance of budget to actual, and they ask us a lot of questions. And we have to be able to explain, oh, you know, we see that you guys budgeted to use $1.8 million of fund balance within your 2024 levy. Could you please explain the rationale for that? So we have to be able to explain that. And quite honestly, this would be really hard to explain if we were using that much money out of fund balance. I think we would have to say that we really had to use it to balance our operating budget for 2025, because we just couldn't get our revenues and our expenses to balance. I mean, some of that we can attribute to the out-of-home placement, some of it we can attribute to the out-of-county housing for our inmates. But, you know, that could affect our bond rating and our ability to get good interest rates on bonds going forward.
So what if, on the other side of this, so what if you were to increase this to, what would be the negative impacts of increasing this to 750? Because then we'd pull less out of general fund. Is there a negative from a bond rating standpoint of doing this?
I specifically asked Justin when I was talking to him about this. He's, you know, because he was kind of hesitant about this whole idea. And I said, well, you know, in your eyes, what looks worse? Utilizing a significant amount out of your fund balance or issuing short-term borrowing for these reasons? And he said, it definitely looks better to have the short-term borrowing.
like Jim just suggested, if it were 750, and let's say all the stuff that affected Jeremy and the insurance premiums only came to, say, 500, where would you spend the other 250?
It would be put into a fund balance and carry forward.
Just the regular thing, or that could be used for contingency or whatever.
Well, not contingency, no. It would have to be used for these purposes.
You would almost have to use it, say, take our property insurance, put it in here, and then take the amount from property insurance and maybe put that in contingency or something like that. And move some numbers around. You wanted to increase contingency. I don't see personally where we have much for options here. Well, we have options. None of them are good. I'm just gonna lay it out there. All have a negative to them.
So if we go this route, we wouldn't have to look at staffing cuts and all of that.
That is your decision.
Rephrase the question. If we did this, if we approved it for some to say 750. So then, and then the balance came out of the general fund, 900,000 or $1 million. Would that amount be able, could you explain away that amount? Or is that still put you in a tight spot for?
Well, here's my concern, is that insurance premiums truly are an operating expense. We have the same insurance premiums that we have to pay from year to year. So including those in our initial calculation of it, it doesn't really, I mean, this is your guys' decision, but it just doesn't really sit right with me because that's an ongoing operating cost. And, if I was, rating on a bond, I would kind of look at that too, like, that is more so borrowing for true operating costs when that's historically been built into our regular budget.
But I would be willing to gamble that all of these other counties that are doing this, that's exactly what they're doing.
That's all of them are, yeah. I mean that's
It's their way of passing it along to the taxpayer because the county doesn't have enough money to run it.
And when the only way that your operating levy can increase is through your net new construction, and that's given us an 11.69% increase over 13 years. I mean, I'm pretty sure that cost of everything have increased by more than that in the last 5 years. So
I'd be willing to bet that insurance and everything else has went up.
it has, not as significantly as some other things, but that's just.
So I guess guys I'll say it again, Phil wasn't here, but our option is do something with this note, take the remainder out of general fund, call it good. Or do nothing with this note, and we go back and take everything out of general fund, call it good. Go back into these budgets, cut some more. Do we feel comfortable? Or we have the furlough, which is why we were brought here with the possibility of doing a joint with personnel, because we can't do those without personnel, furlough days, changing hours, or eliminating positions. So if we want to avoid that, there's where we're at.
Avoid it for what, a year, 2 years? I mean,
Well,
it's kind of a
don't know,
Band-Aid
but I would say we'll be looking at something similar next year. But it's a crystal ball that I don't have, but.
And I would like to point out too, that because we'd be issuing general obligation debt, this requires a 3/4 vote of the members elect of the county board. I forgot to update that board action section on the resolution that I had emailed out to you. So it's updated on here, but just, when you're considering that amount, if you think that the comfort level will change with the 500,000 to 750, that's maybe something to consider too. So, we could do all that, but then it's the county board. And if the board does not vote that 3/4 of the members elect, then we're kind of back to where we
They
were.
might not vote it through just because there's 1.1 coming out of the general fund,
Correct.
I don't know.
Yeah, this would be separate from the rest of the budget, but just full disclosure.
I just think it should also be mentioned that budget might be increasing for the animal shelter because the city has pulled out, as of 12/31, and so we don't know where that's gonna end up yet. We don't have anything definite on that, so some of
Did you
them.
went and had a meeting with them and renegotiated already, or has it, what, have we
No,
done?
it has not. We've gotten a letter saying they're pulling out as of 12/31 unless we arrive at a new agreement. And so I'm just saying, as a wild card, keep in the back of your mind.
Let's not get too far off base though, but it's a good point. Let's try to stay on this topic. Are we gonna do a promissory note or not? That's what's on the floor right now.
I think it's a better option than furloughing or laying people off or, because our wages are low now and employee morale is not the greatest. And so I think we should avoid some of that. But what I brought up in finance before and everything is I'm just afraid we're gonna be at the same position next year discussing the same thing again.
Yeah, I don't think this solves the problem.
And I mentioned that everything's gotta be laid on the table and everything has to be looked at. Because like I said, we're gonna be sitting here next year at the same time, going over the same thing. Unless we get all of this carbon credits.
So would anyone like to make a motion regarding what we have on the floor right now?
I will make a motion to issue $750,000 in taxable general obligation promissory notes for 2024, pay off in 2024.
Okay, we have a motion on the floor for Mr. Wedwig. Do we have a second?
Can I amend his motion?
Gotta have a second
I
first.
think you have to have a second before.
Yeah, if there's no second, then the motion will die. So I'll ask again, we have a motion on the floor for $750,000 for Mr. Wedwig. Obligated promissory notes. Do we have a second? Third and final, we have a motion on the floor. $750,000. Do we have a second? Motion dies for lack of a second.
I'll move that we issue general obligation bonds in the amount of $500,000.
Okay, we have a motion from Mr. Coggins, obligation funds in the amount of $500,000. Do we have a second? A motion from Mr. Coggins for $500,000 obligation funds. Do we have a second? I will second that. We have a motion, Mr. Coggins, and I seconded it for resolution authorizing $500,000 general obligation promissory notes. Any more discussion?
Mr. Chair, I'd like to request a roll call vote.
Okay. Noted. Is there any more discussion?
I call roll call.
Go ahead.
Mr. Coggins,
Aye. Yes.
Mr. Anderson,
No.
Mr. Wedwig,
Yes.
Mr. Meyer,
Yes.
motion carried.
What's that?
You have a resolution to sign, whatever.
So now, is the consensus then that we want to move, the committee needs to figure out now, is the remainder gonna come out of general obligation, or do we wanna look at 2, 3, and 4? Which will require us to go into a joint with personnel.
I mean, if there's recommendations that there's, staffing positions that are unnecessary, we should get rid of any unnecessary positions.
Okay.
I guess I don't know who had the recommendation for unnecessary, but if there is, if they're not necessary, they're not necessary, they're either necessary or not, you know, I guess that's kind of what I say.
So what was Richard's recommendation on that, to proceed forward?
So if you're not ready to finalize and forward the budget to county board pulling out of general fund, then we would ask, Chair Wallace to call personnel to order so you guys can jointly go through 2, 3, 4, and 5.
Okay. Do we need to vote on that as a committee, or just do a consensus?
Consensus, yep.
So did we have positions that weren't necessary?
I'm not answering that in open session.
Do you recommend going into closed session?
We are not on that agenda item.
No, is it finance committee's consensus that we wanna go into a joint, or discuss these matters further?
I think we need to. I think our hands are forced here.
Mr. Reddick?
Yes.
Okay. And I guess we will proceed with Johnny.
Meeting started at 3:45. Personnel. We need to approve the minutes. Is that what we need to do?
I can hear you, what's
We
that?
need to approve the minutes for September 5th and September 26th. Okay.
I'll make the motion to approve the minutes. Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Carried. Public comment on board personnel, agenda items only. Second call. Public comments for personnel, agenda items only. Third and final call, personnel agenda items only. So, no comments. We need to close now.
No, so let me just kind of introduce how we got here. So we're here today in this joint meeting because the Finance Committee has requested a meeting with personnel to discuss possible ways to reduce the budgeted deficit for 2025 by looking at payroll and benefit costs. Per the county's handbook, quote, in the event of a reduction in force, layoffs will be determined under the guidance of the Personnel Committee by the Administrative Coordinator, Human Resources Manager, and Department Administrator after considering various job-related factors, including but not limited to knowledge, skills, ability, performance, qualifications, efficiency, and experience. Also, per county ordinance, quote, all committees shall, upon approval of a request from its county department or otherwise, submit to the Personnel Committee for its approval any proposed change in the hours of any county position, adding any new county position, and the reclassification of any county employee. The Personnel Committee shall, upon its approval, submit the request to the county board. And all committees shall, when the county hiring, promotion, change of status, disciplinary action, termination, or other county personnel actions may be anticipated, be responsible to consult the county's personnel handbook, follow established county procedures, and involve the Personnel Committee as appropriate or required. The Finance Committee has been working on the budget since August. The levy ask came in approximately $2.8 million over. Finance initially cut what they felt were wants and not needs from departmental operating budgets. The committee then directed each department to cut their budgets by 15% without touching wages or benefits. Aside from two departments, 15% cuts weren't possible. The Finance Committee then directed the HR manager and the admin coordinator to meet with each department to discuss staffing requirements and possible efficiencies. As I mentioned before, any reduction in force is determined under the guidance of the Personnel Committee, so that is the reason that Finance motioned to have this meeting today. So if you would like to discuss a reduction in full-time employee hours, which is something that Finance had discussed last week, if you'd like to discuss potential furlough days in 2025, that is an open session discussion. If you would like to talk about specific positions or persons, we would need to go into closed. And just a reminder that when we go into closed, we need to keep it closed and we can only go into closed once. You can't go in and out and in and out.
So, who leads from here? It's on both agendas.
Yep, so I don't know, Sherry, if you wanna take the lead, or Jim, it doesn't matter.
How many hours would need to be reduced to cover the shortfall?
Well, that's significantly reduced, so if we were talking just the general employees covered by the wage scale, it would be approximately
days per employee. But if you reduce reduced hours, how many hours per employee would that amount?
Well-
Same number times 6,
Right.
48 hours.
Sorry. So approximately 46 and a half.
Yeah.
Depending on, you know, if they're on a, that's if they're on a 7.75 hour, 38.75 hour work week.
Does that include all of our full-time employees?
The ones covered under the wage scale. Because that's really, had to,
How many hours did you say you have to do?
approximately 46 and a half more if they're 40 hours.
And that would get us where on the overall budget?
To that million, no, approximately $1 million, but, and I have to say approximately because, not every position is levy funded.
So that's what it's gonna take to cut 150,000.
To get down to the million, so it's initially
So theoretically, somebody could take a half a day a month. They can't all take Fridays.
Unless we shut the courthouse down for Friday. I mean, the last time that furloughs were done, it was like, everybody took the same day. It was, the courthouse was shut down.
Oh.
Do you
What's
have financial impact on, like, this, for the employees between what and what?
Oh, how much it would affect each individual one?
I can't go through all of them, but what is that?
Yeah, like, just a minute, let me try.
Financial impact, if you cut 46 hours, remember? If you cut the 46 hours, is that what you're asking?
You know the blended rate for hourly?
Just throwing it into my,
If you did a half a day a month,
so the average, like, annual loss of wages would be about 1,250 per employee on average.
what are we to keep employees with the wages they have now?
And you said that's with benefits?
No, that's just to their gross.
So we don't know what the savings to the county would be with benefits?
Well, and, you know, it's specific on position
That's
too,
gonna
because
be
some
really fluid.
positions are, right, and some are grant funded, and
That's not even gonna be all tier bottom.
6 days takes care of the whole $1,150,000 or whatever that number is,
About, assuming that's all levy funded though, you know, but then there's some that are grant funded and the grant funded fluctuates based on, you know, what's available for grant funding in some budgets,
how
like
many
some
grant funded positions are there?
completely grant funded. Oh, Jeremy, do you know how many? I mean, that's hard, like especially at HHS, that's hard to say because
Not a lot that are total grant funded, because we use up that grant for operational costs, it's not just salary. I'm gonna say,
like specifically LandCon has a lot of grant funding that covers their position costs in there. However, there's levy in most of those budgets as well, and that covers most of those wages. Forestry, half of the administrator's salary is reimbursed, so that would reduce the reimbursement that we get from the state on that, because you have to turn in your actual wage calculations, and that's a 50% reimbursement. Drug court, the wages end up being claimed on the grant, but there is a 25% cash match, which is mostly met with our indirect cost allocations.
you've got like CST, but then you have, which is 100% funded like that, through the grant. But then like economic support, that's a 50% funded allocation, but you have your maintenance of effort requirement. So it's really convoluted in there, because there is a levy aspect.
But this number here doesn't include benefits, we wouldn't be paying WRS, we wouldn't be paying FICA, we wouldn't be paying workers' comp on those wages that they're too. Although actually, I think we do have to pay workers' comp on furlough wages, and you know what they would have done, I'd have to talk to our worker comp our auditor about that.
Well, these three are kind of hard to talk about one without the other. We've actually kind of skipped ahead here a little bit. The first one is discussion of staffing needs for 2025. But again, it's difficult to do without talking about the other.
There's no increased staffing asks, are there?
What's that mean?
There's no increased staffing asks for 2025, are there?
Well, potentially with whatever happens with the animal shelter, I mean, that would have to, because right now what's in the budget is that the city's paid 40% of those costs for the.
Yeah, that's not a staffing thing, that's a budgetary item.
Right, but
I'm saying nobody's asking for more people.
I think a couple of people are, but it would not affect the levy at all. They're like fully grant funded positions, so.
And 2 and 3 are kind of the same thing.
Well, one is permanent and one is temporary.
Then you guys know what we've been going through in finance. You go right, left, or just charge straight ahead into the wall.
Yeah. I'm gonna take my hair off, but that's not gonna happen.
That's it for me too.
So I guess I can give a little recap. Ashley and I met with each department, and I will say that the response to any potential cut in staffing hours was swift and very strong. Several departments, this will absolutely not work in: clerk of courts, district attorney, ambulance. I'm gonna leave law law enforcement out of this because this doesn't apply to them at all with them being in the union. So if I don't mention law enforcement, it's not because I've forgotten about them, it's because this doesn't apply. And also potentially the highway department. A few other departments and or divisions are mandated to work certain hours or be available, and an example of that is in Jeremy's department. So if you were thinking of going down to 34, that just doesn't work for economic support with the consortium. Of all the departments we spoke to, department heads would rather see selective restructuring over cutting everyone's hours and pay.
What does that mean?
Position eliminations over taking everyone's pay down.
Okay.
If you were to look at a reduction hours, this would not only severely impact our county employees, but also the ability of the county to provide services. And at the end of the day, that's why we're here, is to provide those services. The take-home pay impact for our staff, if you went down to 34 hours, would range from a loss of $4,500 to $14,000. The significant pay cut would likely result in resignations. Ashley and I have put our heads together and we feel that the resignations could be as high as 50% of our workforce. So how can the county continue to provide services if we don't have staff? And she's already having trouble recruiting. If you want to speak on that a little more, you're more than welcome to. And if we slash hours and pay, I mean, you're setting our HR manager up for failure in bringing people in. Did you want to talk at all about some of the offers that you've had rejected or what exit surveys are saying?
Yeah, I think you guys have been made aware of this, you know, over the last month. So obviously a lot of our employees are leaving for higher wages, better benefits. Currently we have 14 open positions already with the county right now that we're hiring for. A very frequent question that is asked is about our wages, and when I tell everybody our wages, a very frequent response is, that's it? And what's your room for negotiation? And usually it's, well, there really isn't room for negotiation due to, again, where our other staff are at too. So our take-home salaries are already low, so decreasing, like you said, any of your hours or even doing that to furlough days is gonna decrease theirs. We have a lot of employees that currently stick with us right now because they are loyal to Rusk County, but a lot of these people could get other jobs in other counties and they're just not choosing to do that. But I feel if we start slashing any of this stuff, they're definitely going to be jumping ships to other counties, and they will be willing to make that 40-minute drive over to Rice Lake, down to Eau Claire, to Chippewa, to Barron, depending where people live within our county. I know 50% sounds like a lot, but the number of people that came and talked to us and the number of department heads, I really do not feel we are exaggerating by that. I mean, department heads and staff and, you know, every level. And that's not meant to be a threat either. It's just a lot of people, we have a lot of people in this county, or in this courthouse, that are currently living paycheck to paycheck right now. So even, you know, taking away that amount of money is huge to them.
Did you ask about furlough days? Did you ask that same question?
Yes, so at the time, we were still talking about 12 furlough days, so.
We're talking about what?
We were still talking about 12 furlough days, as
Yeah.
Jamie mentioned. Okay, so some of this may change, but that would be an option that some department heads would be more okay with, because we can monitor the budget in real time, right? So if some of our higher cost placements fell off, we could say, okay, we don't actually need to use all 6. But keep in mind, like Ashley said, that unpaid furlough days are still an impact to an employee's take-home pay. And in addition, an extended amount of furlough days will impact the ability of the county to operate efficiently. And again, we were talking about 12 at this time. So for instance, the DA's office, generally speaking, has an obligation to get an arrestee in front of the judge within 48 hours. So you're gonna be impacting severely operations in that department. The finance department needs to process payroll and get it to the treasurer's office so they can pay our employees and AP. So it's just little things like that we don't think about when we shut the courthouse down for a day or two.
I think you're at a point where you have to choose the least worst alternative.
Yep.
If you furlough though, you get to play unemployment benefits for the day? They have to perform.
Unemployment has a 1-week waiting period.
Yeah, they would.
I mean, if you furloughed everybody for 2 weeks at a time, yeah.
Then you could.
But as long as you're not going over. And you obviously wouldn't allow them to use any of their leave balances because that would defeat the whole purpose.
been working here a long time, can I use my PTO?
Nope.
Hmm?
Nope.
Why?
It doesn't help our deficit, it doesn't help the problem.
Vacation?
You're sneaky.
That's okay.
No.
We don't have it.
And you're covered by a union contract if you're using vacation, so you don't have to worry about this.
Nice.
We're down to we either tick off the employees or tick off the general public with the taxes. Or all of the above.
Yeah, it's door number 3.
So you're just levying it out to the county, so taxpayers are making up the difference for this managed budget.
Did you say there were 14 open positions right now?
Yeah.
Are any of those
Can't talk about that.
absolutely necessary?
Yeah, we can't talk about that. All I will say on that portion is, when you guys ask if any necessary positions, I have one question back to you. Do you think any department head is gonna come forward and say, yeah, this is an unnecessary position for me?
I was gonna ask that question and then, yeah,
I mean, just,
but I knew what you were gonna tell me.
I don't think any of these positions came before us and they said, this is an unnecessary position.
Yeah.
But on the other side, I mean, bottom line is, guys, how do we keep funding these, I mean, how do we keep all these services if we're not gonna figure out a way to fund them? So you can't have both. You don't fund them, you gotta keep pulling out of general fund for right now, that's the only answer I see. Or borrow the money, one way, shape, or form. If you wanna keep providing the same services and not look at positions, or which positions I'm sure are gonna have some effect on public services, one way or another.
Just because I don't remember, did we say we were, doing the 500 and then the 1.15 out of the contingency for next year? Is that on the table?
We didn't decide yet on what we're gonna pull from general fund.
Okay, alright, I just don't.
We just voted through the 500,000.
500, yeah, but then
Because the 1.15 is gonna have some bearing on what this committee decides as a joint.
yeah, right.
I don't feel comfortable slamming the employees and taking things away from them, because we're not gonna have employees to do things.
Say that again?
So I don't feel comfortable taking away hours, taking away pay from our employees. We're having a hard time getting employees and keeping them, so they're the ones we have.
Well, companies don't either, I'm sure, when they lay people off, but it's either, that's their choice to survive. And we're almost to, I mean, we have a surplus, but no offense to the public, so I would say we're kinda getting close to survival mode right now. Yeah, but I agree with you, I don't like it either. But in all honesty, this board, I felt in the last 3 years has tried to go the other direction. Now here we sit. I mean, we tried to increase wages, better insurance, this year we were a little bit more in HSA. So staffing needs, I guess, on that one, we gotta keep this thing moving, or we're gonna sit here and look at each other until tomorrow morning. So staffing needs, the consensus then that you got from department heads is, there's no room to subtract.
You mentioned
No, I-
strategic restructuring
Yeah.
as
That's
the
the
least
only words
unsavory.
that they can
Yes,
use.
that is the, if they had to choose, if they were forced to choose.
Okay, so there's an option.
But for us to discuss that option, we need one closed session.
Have they already thought about and put that on paper?
Yes, we met with each department, yes.
And that would cover the shortfall?
Well, I guess to put it in perspective, Jamie, what did you say? 6 furlough days would cut 150,000. What's the average with benefits salary of a staff member here?
Rough numbers, I'd say 60,000, and it definitely depends on which health insurance plan they would be on.
Right, and if they're funded by levy, so that's, to put it in perspective, that's the, you know, 3-ish positions would effectively do the same thing, the budget.
So with that being said, do we have a motion to go into closed session then?
So if that were to happen, what about the 14 vacancies?
Can't talk about that yet.
You selectively not fill 3 of those?
Well, that would be an option, because then you wouldn't be hurting any of our current staff.
Correct.
That also needs to be discussed in closed, correct? I mean, cause it's gonna roll into everything before we're done, so.
Yeah, it would probably be dangerous to leave it open.
So I guess from the finance side, does anyone have anything more to discuss on 1, 2, or 3, or is it consensus? Not a vote right now, but is consensus to go into closed?
I think we need to go into closed.
Harry?
We have a motion that
Well, I just wanted consensus before I stop discussion. Is that personnel's consensus then also?
Yep.
Okay. So, finance, looking for a motion to go into closed. Do you want me to read that also? Need a motion first.
So
Motion from Mr. Coggins, going to closed.
Second.
Second from Mr. Wedwick. You want a roll call vote on that too, right?
It has to be for.
Yeah. Mr. Coggins,
after you read it.
after you.
want me to read it first? I'm a little rusty on this. Wisconsin, a motion and a second to go into closed session per Wisconsin statutes 19.85, para 1, para C, for considering employment, promotion, compensation, or performance evaluation data of any public employee over which the government, oh, I'm reading off. Is they both the same?
Yes.
I got the wrong agenda here, I'm doing double duty today. Any public employee over which the governmental body has jurisdiction or exercises responsibility with to consider possible position restructuring or elimination of specific positions or persons. Mr. Coggins.
Aye.
Mr. Undershoot.
Yes.
Mr. Wedwick.
Yes.
And I am yes.
Then I'd like a motion.
I move we go into closed session.
I'll second.
Mr. Russell, second by Mr. Moody, go in closed session. Wisconsin Stat 1945, Pier 1, Pier C, for considering employment promotion, compensation, performance evaluation data for any public employer which a government body has jurisdiction or exercises the responsibility with to consider possible position restructuring or elimination of specific positions or persons. Mr. Russell?
Yes.
Mr. Meyer?
Yes.
Yes. We now are in closed session.
It's Crystal's. Yeah, Crystal's. Oh, good, okay, great. So I think we do this whole person. Yeah.
Okay, no motion will be made in open session that was discussed in closed session.
Alright, back on finance. So, where are we at with what we need to pull from the general fund right now?
Let me just delete this number out here.
Is the consensus that we're going to add 100 to contingency, or what's your guys' thoughts on finance here?
From 2 to 3.
That's what it would be if we added 100.
This is the contingency budget, and this is the summary of all, so that, this is what, we would be looking right now without changing anything else, what we would need to take out of the fund balance. The 100 bag.
That's with 300 in
No,
contingent.
it's not, so should I change that to the 300? So that's 800.
That'll leave our fund balance at roughly 13 or just a little less, correct?
Are there any other budgets,
Unassigned fund balance.
are there any other budgets we need to address that were left in limbo from our last meeting that I'm, or somebody here's not remembering?
I don't believe so.
So if nobody has any changes, I guess I'm looking for a motion to approve the budget.
So putting this 805. 786
If we have something more we wanna discuss, then by all means.
Oh, I guess the only other one would be the animal shelter situation.
I brought that up before, so. Unknown.
Well, we can discuss it now, I mean, if you wish.
It's unknown at this point.
So, the numbers we have for that, we don't know if they're correct or not at this point, because right now we're counting on 60. So hopefully the city can come back to the table and work that out.
When is the meeting scheduled for that? To negotiate?
That's not on the agenda.
Who's in charge of that type of negotiation?
So typically it would be the chair of that committee.
Okay, if that's not gonna work, then I would recommend that you step in there.
Rich and I have advised that, and I believe he's allowed for that item to be on the next animal control board agenda.
If that goes south, what will we be on the hook for in addition? So then
Is that
that leaves your
300 sufficient?
contingency at 238.
Right, do you, with that in mind, are you still comfortable with what's there? Although, so the finance committee, well, that's still, it's a budgeted expenditure, so it would be within their budgeted expenditure, it'd just be a revenue shortfall. So I was gonna say the finance committee only has the authority to approve transfer of contingency for up to 10% of the budgeted expenditures. So if it's more than that, it would have to be a budget amendment made by the full county board anyway.
Which maybe is a good way to leave it. Okay, finance committee, anything else? I'm looking for more changes or motion of some sort. Unless you wanna stay here longer.
So the motion would be to,
Finalize the 2025 budget for approve, as
As presented.
as presented.
Yeah, I'll have some cleanup to do yet on those individual pages and stuff, but these would be, would be approving the levy really as set here.
I'll make that motion.
We have a motion from Mr. Coggins, need a second. Again, I have a motion from Mr. Coggins, I need a second. To approve the budget as presented. I will second it. So we have a motion, Mr. Coggins, we have a second from myself, to approve the budget as presented. Is there any more discussion? Any more discussion? Hearing none. All in favor, signify by aye. Aye. All opposed, same sign. I did not hear a majority vote.
Can we get some discussion about why we didn't have a no or an abstention?
So if I'm correct with what I heard, this motion just,
If you, God, I gotta call Rich, if you don't say anything, are you voting yes?
Not voting anything.
What does that mean? If you don't verbalize a yes or a no,
Where is it, minute?
what,
Rich said it was a yes. When I had this question, he said it's a yes, so
Yeah.
I don't say anything. But you have to verbally say no.
ask him, we can still call a roll call vote.
voices were heard for the no vote, the motion passes.
Okay, for Corporation Council, motion passes, budget is approved as presented, and will be forwarded to county board. I see nothing else on here to discuss, so I'm looking for a motion for finance to adjourn.
I so move.
Motion by Mr. Conger, need a second?
Second.
Second by Mr. Undershoots, all in favor? Aye.
Aye.
We are adjourned in finance.
Shall we carry on? We can just start with my stuff, right?
Yep, and then both Jeremy and Crystal are here.
Okay, human services. What do you?
How we doing? Good evening, everyone. Jeremy Jacobs, Human Services, second floor. It's okay if I sit right here? Good with you? Pretty good. All right, I think probably the definition of not the optimal time to be here for a reclassification, but my ask is simply this. With a request date of January 1, 2025, Carla Murray in our department, she's a child support specialist. She is eligible, given our past practice, to move to a child support specialist 2 position. Child support specialist is a grade 7. She's on step 4 as we sit today. The ask is that she moves to a child support specialist 2, grade 8, step 1. The difference in the wage is 15 cents. It's currently she is at $20.91. It would go to $21.06. The fiscal impact would be $302.25, of which 66% or $199 is paid for through the general purpose revenue that we receive from the state of Wisconsin for child support. That being said, the differences that we've talked about in our committee, in our Human Services Committee, is that it's really an experience issue. She was hired with no experience in child support. She has now been there for 2 years, and that is our ask based on the JDQ. A quick history here is that the reason we have not had this kind of request in the past is we've had some significant longevity. Child Support Specialist 2, Kelly Savoma, was with our department from 2008 to 2022. Janice Zimmer is our lead child support worker. She has been with our department the longest. She's been with us since 1990. She is still employed with us. And then Supervisor Carla Kloss rounds out the unit as 75% of her time is the child support specialist, 25% of her time is to manage our front reception area. And so that's my ask, is as of 1/1/2025, we would like to include this wage adjustment and reclassification into our budget.
So, question for you. I think we talked about this before. Does it matter if it says 1 or 2 behind your name? It's just a matter of each year you go up a step, you have to go up a grade. And it just muddies the water if you're 1 or 2 or whatever. Is that not correct?
Sort of. In this circumstance, when the JDQs were done, when the job description questionnaires were done for Carlson Detman, the child support specialist is no experience. Child support specialist 2 is based on 2 to 3 years experience, and then the child support lead is based on the ability to take over the department in the absence of the supervisor. And so the difference between the 1 and the 2 is, like I said, years of experience.
So, it's a longevity.
It is a longevity.
Correct, and I understand that, and Carla's my friend, and I get that. So, nothing against Carla or anything else, that you used her name in here.
Yeah, this isn't a
I
performance
don't
review for her.
understand the 1, 2, I mean, when you hire somebody, you're either gonna hire them at this step or this step or this step based on their knowledge. What, if they're laterally crossing from a different, so let's say you have somebody come in that's had 4 years in Chicopee County, comes here. We have to start them at a 1, we start them at a 2, we put them at what grade? I mean, it gives Ashley more hiring ability to take numbers off the end of the same worker. I mean, highway is gonna ask the same thing. I don't understand putting a 1 and 2 in back of it if it's just a matter of a year.
Yep. So-
It's not a matter of money, because in January, most things they get a step up.
So to answer the multitude of questions and circumstances you brought up and also brought up in our committee meeting, is that this is a past practice. I'm here because I am operating under a system that was started before I became the Human Services Director, and it is a longevity issue. We, at the time of the GDQ, we worked away from the social service worker 1, 2, and 3. This is something that we did not necessarily catch at that time, and that was then made it through to the Carlson Denman. So, right, wrong, or indifferent, I'm here advocating for a worker that has met the criteria based on longevity, to be considered for this.
So if we do nothing except say we're taking away 1 and 2, she'll still step up and would be the same thing except in back of an annual 2 things, so we just won't, there'll be none. Is that correct? Is that correct?
If I had it my way, I would take away the child support specialist 2 position, is what I would do, and that's what I said in committee, is that we have a child support specialist and then we have a lead child support worker. And so if we were to work on this next, like we talked about in committee, is that we would remove one of these because it is a longevity issue. The GDQs are almost exactly the same.
The only difference is
Is your experience.
that's exactly how highways, and we'll get to that one down the road, but those are, I think, the only 2 left in all the positions of the courthouse.
So is it a specific description with the, I mean, when you say longevity, I mean, it automatically happens at 5 years?
2 or 3 is what it says on the GDQ. It's just, there's a box towards the bottom of the GDQ that talks about experience level. And you check the box. You check that box because that was
Well,
because Kelly was in the spot. We had her in the spot from 2008 to 2022. She whirled into that. Well, when she left, we didn't replace as a 2, we replaced as a 1. That's what we would always do, is go to the lowest level based on the level of experience. So that's what we did, and so now we're stuck with a 1, 2, and a lead worker, and we wanna get away from that. But at this point in time, like I said, it's not optimal timing, so.
I think you take 1 and 2 off of it.
if I
It's $100.
If I can speak to my HR opinion, I think until we get that changed, same with what I'm gonna speak with the highway, I think until we can get that changed, we really should move forward with that.
They both need to be changed
That's what
because
we've been doing for past practice, so I think we need to move forward with giving them the increase until we look at getting it changed and getting it to 1 classification.
So you're going to take that and run with it and say, by the time I come back here next year, I won't have all these little road bumps. We'll have 1 position and then a lead.
And hopefully she doesn't leave, so I don't have to come back on this.
Well, I'm not
I'm hoping that the
I know what
longevity
you're saying,
stays,
no.
but yeah,
No.
from a standpoint of cleaning it
I
up.
just wanna know when is this gonna get cleaned up, I mean,
Yep.
we just had a very long discussion about stuff, and I wanna be back here having a discussion about muddy water.
I will be back to committee to say I'd like to remove the 1 and the 2 and just create 1 position, and I'll come back to personnel with it. Yeah, in full transparency, clearly because of partial the reason to be here, there is a levy ask in child support. There is a trickle down based on general purpose revenue, but there is a levy ask in child support. And that being said, this contributes to that levy. It's a wages issue. It contributes contributes to that levy. But at the same time, it's, in this program specifically, there's 66% reimbursement on expenditures. That being said, there still is 34% that will trickle down into that levy.
That's trying to force your hand in cleaning up the stuff.
Yeah. No problem. I just wanna be fully transparent because our department is causing some grief. Unfortunately, so. This would still be a full county board issue, is that I would have to bring it, I believe, under resolution to the full county board, correct?
Did you already bring it to your oversight committee? Yep. And then it should go through finance as well, and then county board.
I should have hung on one more minute, I could have had you both.
I gotta listen to this.
One more time. I'll
At
put it
least I
up,
know what you're gonna say.
I'll put it in writing.
And now you know what to tell them.
I'm debating it
Would I-
all the time.
Would I have to go back potentially to actually get us to remove, how could we streamline it, so we could just have a child support specialist and a lead worker, and get rid of the two?
Here, the
I'm
personnel
sorry. Are we
personnel
creating?
committee would get rid of a classification.
Okay, so my question, I guess, would be is, we're gonna move this, hopefully, based on vote 2-2, we would get rid of the child support specialist and just have the two in the lead, because we want somebody in the two spot like we did before, which caused this grief on the end.
So where do you hire at? Two?
So we just hire we probably changed the title.
Well, it's interesting because Carlson Devin, the last time I spoke to them, they said that the experience doesn't put that much weight into it. So if that's true, because I talked to them about with the highway thing, so if that's true, then why is there a different scale for when the only difference is experience? But I think if we were to reclass, not saying we do that, but if we were to take that child specialist to take out the experience requirement of 2 to 3 years, send it back to them to reclass, I don't think it will change.
We'll get rid of the new speaking.
That's what we could do if they wanted to make sure.
We're specialist in the lead. That's what we're. Okay. Okay. What do you think?
Fine by me.
Any questions? Knowing that I'm going to finance, I will entertain a motion.
Good chair.
You guys here waiting for you to make motion.
We do need to clean it up, but if it's been past practice at this point, I'll make the motion and approve it, move it on to finance.
I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
Thank you very much. Also,
Finance.
also, thank you for the heavy lifting on the other conversations that you're having. Thank you. I'm sure it's not simple, so thank you. We appreciate it.
Well, it's not your fault.
We get it.
Well, then fix it.
Well, maybe by next week.
Okay. Thank you. About tomorrow morning. We'll still be here.
I was gonna say, I might still be here. Thank you very much. All warmed up, ready to go. Thank you very much. Thank you. Thanks, Bill.
As you all know, I'm Crystal Cleveland. I'm here on behalf of the DA office. So I will make this quick. This is about 3.5 minutes total of background for you to understand where we're coming from. As you all may or may not be aware, our district attorney's office is required to provide victim witness services by statute. It is an actual requirement that we have. They are spelled out by statute. They were amplified by Marcy's law passing a few years ago. And it's something that's required full-time, 5 days a week, regardless of whether the courthouse is open or not. Because it is required by statute, it is also reimbursed by the state at a certain level when those services are provided by our crime victim witness coordinator. Now that amount is variable from year to year. Over the last 20 years, it's fluctuated from about a high of 60% to a low of about 38% during COVID. So we just conservatively budget at 40% for that. Now, over the past few years, actually quite a few years, we've been very lucky with the cooperation of the sheriff's office. We have actually had our crime victim witness coordinator has been working 5 hours in our DA office under our reimbursable state mandated thing, and 3 hours per day under a VOCA grant in the sheriff's office. And that's how we've been able to flex her hours so that she's always available for jury trials, so she's available for any of the court hearings that we need her during the week. Unfortunately, VOCA funding has decreased across the board, and the grant that she would normally have to cover those 3 hours in the sheriff's office has decreased as well. It went from what has normally been about 41,000 down to 13,000 for the year that starts October 1st of this year through September of next year. As a result of that, while we still need her in the building and we need her available full-time for the DA office, we have less funding available for the grant that covered the hours that she had in the sheriff's office. What we're proposing in order to maximize the funding available, and it should have very little, if any, impact at all on our bottom line, is to increase her hours in the DA office from the 5 hours per day that it currently is to the 7.75 hours. That would be reimbursable by the state at a certain percent, which of course we don't have that number right now. But we want to delay that until after her funding under that grant is fully expended. So right now she's 5 hours for us, 3 hours for the sheriff's office. The funding under her grant will take her close to the beginning of the year, somewhere in there, because it's about a quarter of the total funding for a year that she normally gets. That way we can maintain things right now, not change the sheriff's budget for this year, not have any impact that way, and fully maximize that funding. And then as soon as that runs out, switch her to being 7.75 hours in our DA office, which is state mandated. We don't have a choice anyways, but then because that's also state reimbursable and we've been budgeting at such a low reimbursement rate, we may have actually 0 impact on our bottom line. But I wanna, because her upstairs position cannot have any hint of having anything to do with grant work, because it's the way that it is written, we do not wanna have any overlap, and I wanna make sure that we've got it formally drawn out so that there are no complications with either funding source. So, anyone have any questions?
Does the state only fund wage, or do they also fund benefits?
It is her, well, it's certain services that they provide through her. So our office is required to provide them, but if we do it through a crime victim witness coordinator, they reimburse her budget line of a variable amount, which sometimes has been up to 60%, sometimes it's, closer to 45, 50. But it does include benefits, her supplies, everything across the board that is allocated into that crime victim witness line.
But we really don't know what the impact would be to our levy at this point.
We don't, because what happens is after we submit the expenses, then the state reimburses at a certain rate. And I don't know the factors that go into it. I can show you the numbers that it has been over the years, and I mean, we've never dipped below 40%, which is, well, there was 1 year during COVID where they dipped below 40%. Other than that, it has always been between 40 and 60% for the last 20 years. So we always budget conservatively at that 40%. Last year it was 47%, the year before it was 49, the year before it was 48, so we do have the expectation that with the things the governor's been saying, that funding will be increasing, but there is no guarantee. And either way, it is still mandated by the state that we have this position. So it's not a question of whether we have someone there full-time, it's just a matter of the timing to maximize the VOCA grant that's already been awarded, that started under the sheriff's department starting October 1st. Moving forward.
Need a motion?
I don't know that. What are you asking?
We are asking to have the victim witness hours in the district attorney's office increased from 5 to 7.75 hours when the VOCA grant has been expended for the year. So that at that point, when that grant funding has been completed, completed, that then at that point in time, we increased the hours from 5 to 7.75 hours in the DA office.
That was, you said the first one next year.
Because it depends on what wages are and everything, it might be mid-December, it might be mid-January, I don't know that, we can pick a date and adjust from there, or we can just, pick when the funding is expended and go from there at your preference.
And then it's all gonna be absorbed in the DA's office and none in the
Correct.
sheriff's.
I mean,
I understand what you're saying.
correct. The bulk of funding is pretty much dwindling in general, all across the board. We don't know that it will even exist the next year, but we do have that 13,000 that started October 1st, so just, a couple weeks ago, that we do have that amount to use in the meantime.
I have a hard time moving this on without knowing what the cost of the county is gonna be. Especially after what we just did with the budget tonight and passed it, we don't know the impact, if I'm understanding correctly, right?
Correct. Because it's one of those things that's reimbursed after the fact.
Does it
But at
matter
the same
that we
time,
know
it
that?
doesn't
Do we know?
matter.
It doesn't matter, does
It
it?
doesn't matter because by state
It's
statute,
mandated by the state.
the district
Oh,
attorney's
I missed
office.
that. I'm
is
sorry,
required.
I missed that.
So we don't have a choice, the choice that we had before was that we were able to cover that
50
position
hours from the sheriff.
with the combination by completely separating those hours out. So we were able to take advantage of another funding source and the flexibility and cooperation between the sheriff's office and the DA's office to flex her hours as needed to do the right hearings at the right times.
Okay. Yeah, you did say that, my apologies.
I'm gonna motion we approve the changes.
I'll second. And it needs to go on to finance? I'm gonna assume.
It probably should, because it's a change in the,
Then maybe we'll have some more better numbers by, I doubt it, cause finance is next week, but I don't know if you want it on that one or.
So all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, carried on to finance, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Maintenance.
Okay, I'll speak on that one. So, we hired a facilities manager. He is starting with us on 10/28. The motion, when we named the interim facilities manager, the motion does not have an end date on there. And it just says that we named an interim facilities manager. What I am asking in order to, so typically kind of what we have done in the past with past practices is we've named the interim has stopped doing that day one of when the person gets hired on. However, that can kind of really hurt somebody because there has to be a lot of continuity there to train that person when they are coming into the position. And due to all the different departments that this facilities manager is running, all that they're in charge of, we're asking for an extension of the interim facilities manager wage increase for training purposes to be to efficiently and effectively train the new employee.
For how long?
Yeah, how long are you thinking?
I'm thinking, ideally would like 2 months at the end of the year, so he starts October 28th, so if you put it through the end of the year, it'd be 2 months, it'd be about $5,000, give or take, based on what she's making extra now versus what she was. Calculating that financial impact would be about $5,000, but I don't know how much that would actually impact because we still are saving money, and then we've been down, maintenance tech now, since July.
It doesn't sound like there'd be any budgetary.
No, I'd have to do the hard math and figure it out, but I really don't think so.
Well,
But I
it's
think
not
we will.
gonna be any hit, cause there's somebody in
Yeah.
town.
And this will really set us up for success, I think, too.
Yeah.
For how long?
Till
The
the
end
end
of
of the
the
year.
The end of the year, thank you.
12/31.
From October, it'll extend from October 28th is what.
Yeah, cause that's when, and typically that's when we would end it, so.
I'll make the motion to extend the interim facilities wage
One second.
to the end of 2024.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All right. Good. Human resources.
Okay, so human resources report, September, we had 3 total terms. Just as a reminder, those are people that actually had their last day in September. A CCS facilitator, maintenance manager, and then a deputy in the county clerk's office were our 3 people that held their last day in September. We had 6 total hires in September. That means they started with us in September. An on-call EMT, social services case manager, a maintenance tech, a finance accountant 1 in our finance department, which is primarily doing accounts payable, and then 2 CCS service facilitators. And then just to note, we did promote one of our maintenance techs to maintenance manager. So that also happened in September. That's not counted as one of the 6 hires, but just wanted to make you guys aware of that. Open positions, we have currently open facilities manager, accepted offer. He's starting on 10/28. We have a maintenance tech open, operations manager and highway commissioner. We currently are not posting for operations manager at this time until we fill that commissioner spot. CCS service facilitator, we have one of those open. We have a deputy open in the county clerk office. We did interviews on that and we'll be making the offer tomorrow. We have an assistant deputy in the circuit court that's open. That person will be starting at on October 21st. We have a forestry tech position open that we're interviewing for next week. We have a highway worker 1 open that we'll be offering that job to this week. We have 2 economic support specialists open. We don't have those jobs posted quite yet. That was very new, as in yesterday and today. And then 5 jailer dispatcher openings. 1 has an accepted offer starting next week, and 2 people were working on background. So if all of those go through, that would leave us with 2 jailer dispatchers. Any questions about the HR report?
Highway commissioner, when was the last time we posted that?
So it's currently been running. We have not gotten any applicants that would meet our ordinances.
Okay.
For qualifications. So we're getting some applicants, but none that even remotely come close to meeting those ordinances.
I think we're gonna have to eventually revisit that and figure out a plan to get that filled.
I don't know.
I would recommend we specifically put that on this agenda next month if we haven't gained any ground there.
Anything else? Can I go to my next one? Okay, so discuss creation of support staff position for maintenance and extension. So, I put that back on here because, there was a motion on the floor to discuss with, that position and look at creating a part-time job description and looking at hiring that person. After number 1, talking to Shar more about that, and number 2, looking at the potential position cuts that the committee was looking at, wondering if that's the best route to go or not. The extension support person does not really agree to going that route right now. We don't know that it's the best route to take. Want to look at, possibly putting trails end into forestry. So, the forestry has come and talked to us and has made reference that they could have time to do trails end. So that would take that off of Char's plate if we move that over to forestry without trying to hire a part-time position.
So that was moved by support staff.
Yeah, because the motion on the floor is to create a support staff position for maintenance and extension. So asking to not move forward with that and instead move forward with.
Yeah, we should.
We also discussed recycling before. I don't remember how the conversation went.
I think the concern with that is a lot of it happens at one time, so it necessarily won't really feel like something's coming off her plate because it's so heavy on those couple weeks, so in the grand scheme of things, it might help for 2 weeks out of the year or whatever that may be, where Trails End is more kind of constant, so it would actually feel like something's being taken away.
And then she does a lot of invoice, or
Yes.
going through invoices, et cetera. What can we help with there?
We have alternatives for that, remember?
Well, right, but do we wanna address this, any of that at the same time we're gonna move Trails End, is where I'm going with this.
I think we need to, when we don't have such fog of burdens, maybe, like, we need to bring back to personnel some of the stuff we have extra
Right.
abilities, and maybe have that put in on that talk. And then maybe we can figure out that might be a good place to put some more of that weight.
So if we're gonna move some of this workload, we don't need a support staff position.
Correct. That's what I'm asking if we can, because the motion was on the table to do the job descriptions, I'm asking if
We need to take that off, so she needs a motion to take the job description for that off.
Is that what we need?
That's what we need. That's what she's asking for.
I will second that.
All in favor?
Aye.
And opposed? Okay, so that's done. Next.
approve highway worker 1 to highway worker 2 wage increase. So, if you guys will remember, a couple months ago, I was in personnel talking about potentially, merging those highway worker 1 and highway worker 2s into one classification. At that time, you guys had told me that highway needed to make that decision and I needed to take it to highway. So I took it to highway, and highway had decided that at this time they did not wanna touch that, and they did not want to move it into one classification, and they wanted to keep it as a highway worker 1 and a highway worker 2. So instead, they made the motion in highway to approve that the highway worker 1 employees would move up to a highway worker 2 after 3 years of service. And what they would move up to is they would move up to the step that provided them $1 increase. So what I'm asking for today is so we don't have to keep coming back here every time until we can get these classifications fixed, which what I said right now, highway did not want to look at that when I talked to them last month. If we can make a motion that going forward, any highway worker 1s, once they hit 3 years of service, they would be classified as a highway worker 2 and placed at the step that gives them a wage increase of $1 per hour.
We talked about this.
We just did an HHS, and that's why I said clear the water up.
But when I talked about it the first time 3 months ago, you guys had me go back to
Yeah.
highway,
Correct.
yeah, and highway
I
said
think
no.
we're saying clear the water.
There was more to that. I'm trying to remember, why did we?
Because of the budget increase, you guys, it stayed at highway for 2 months. The first time you said you wanted to see the budget increase, so I went back and got the budget increase on that, and then when we brought the budget increase, you guys didn't want to touch it and leave it separate. But again, it's the same thing, they just have 3 years of service, they're the same exact JDQs and job descriptions.
I just think
I think the problem was we didn't know how to sort it out.
Oh.
If I remember, you know, because of how would you keep it? We had some people that were right there. That was the issue.
Yeah, so until we can look at that further,
So it's almost
We
like
had two
that needs
people
to
that
be
hit last
redone on
month.
a JDQ to roll that all into one, right?
that's the exact same thing we just talked to Jeremy about.
Do they have to be redone through Carlson Devlin?
I don't
And
think
take
it's
the
gonna
one
change.
classification out?
It's just a longevity
I
thing.
mean, if you wanna pay $275 for them to reclass it, that's fine, but they're not gonna change, I can 99.9% guarantee that they're not changing the classification of that.
And the job descriptions are the same.
Yeah, and so if I just take up the 3 years of experience, they're not gonna change the wage.
It's just longevity pay.
But that's what we
There was
recommended.
more to that
doing.
discussion, it's coming back to me a little bit now, is the fact that some, when it comes to highway workers, could be hired without a CDL. And would have up to a year to obtain it, correct? Right now?
We haven't hired anybody without their CDL.
Right, but that option was there as the highway worker one, I thought.
But it's not in the JDQ, so you have to go redo that job description in JDQ, because right now in the JDQ for a highway worker one is a CDL requirement.
Oh, it isn't, okay.
I just think it needs to be cleared up when, they just position. It's just a matter of stepping up. And we didn't have that prior to, there was some of those stepping stones, it was start here, and then go here, and now it's,
The annual increase with no fringe benefits to move everybody to a two was almost $22,000.
so everybody's at a one, that's,
Unless they've been here for 3 years, they're at a 2. And I have 2 people that hit in August that I'm trying to get them the pay that they were promised when they were hired, that they would go up $1 when they hit 3 years.
Almost.
So what's the difference in starting pay from a worker one and worker two? That's step one. Is it just $1 less?
No. 21, I have to pull up the wage grid really quick.
Highway worker one, step
2106.
106, yeah. Highway worker two, step one is 2214.
$1.08.
$1.08.
I wish I knew what the impact would be, because I'm leaning back towards just starting everybody at 2 and eliminating it.
$52,000. 22. 21,860.80 without fringe benefits.
What's the shortest term employee we have out there right now? Do you have any idea?
Couple months. Soon to be brand new. I'm offering one this week.
But the rest were like pushing the 2 to 3 year mark, weren't they? That we discussed before?
No, we have seven that are less than 3 years. And 7 that are 3 years or more. But 2 of them are currently being paid at the highway one, so you have 9 that are being paid at a highway worker one. And 6 at a highway worker two.
How many are gonna move?
2 right now. The next ones would be another year in May of next year.
so don't they climb up that scale as we go in January? I mean, I don't know.
Only if the board gives a wage increase in January.
But they don't go up to the next step to 2.
Only if the board gives a wage increase.
Best practice.
Past practice.
Best practice.
This, the $1.
I'll move.
What's your motion?
Mine. Can I
I
tell
need
you?
more than so move on this one.
Highway worker one to highway worker two, highway worker two wage increase. Highway worker two top.
So we're gonna eliminate highway worker one?
I didn't hear that.
No. The motion would be, when a highway worker one
It's 3 years.
3 years of service, they would be placed at the step that provides them at least $1 increase.
Okay, so keep the 1 and 2 is what you're.
Yeah, that's what I'm hearing.
Alright.
just so you're all clear, crystal clear, I'm hoping that that motion is so I don't have to keep coming back here, so we can figure out to either do this, but otherwise, when somebody hits it in 4 months, we don't have to keep doing this, because this is the process, which is why I wanted the motion to be that any highway worker once they hit 3 years of service, their highway worker, they go up to that increase.
I'm trying to remember all of our discussion in highway, and I thought a lot of it was around the fact that they need, in some cases, they need that 3 years to be properly trained.
If you'll remember correctly, that is true, but my argument coming from an HR standpoint is, we can say that in any position, just like how we just had Jeremy here in HHS, he's saying somebody's been here, that's in any position we have, somebody's gonna be, you know, our social workers, they're not allowed to go do certain calls by themselves until they've been here for 1, 2, 3 years, until they have this training, but they don't step up once they hit that, and then, so that's kind of where it all came from, is that most of them went away when you guys went to Carlson Detman, but few of them didn't, and they're essentially just longevity increases, but until we decide to merge them together, I think it's important that we stick with what the past practices were.
There's no way we're ever gonna start to clean up these positions without somebody in a little bit better shape and somebody benefiting from it, unless we leave everything the way it is.
That's why we're gonna have a discussion about these at some point.
So if we're not gonna change this one, then we're probably not ever gonna change anything at HHS.
Well, he's gonna do that, and that's what we're gonna ask the highway commissioner if we get one.
Okay.
Clear the muddy water. We don't have a lead there yet, do we? Is that correct?
Alright, I'm gonna second Mike's motion, we're gonna leave it as is for now, and then, I think, yeah, it needs to be revisited going forward.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Carried.
The next one is employee satisfaction surveys. I don't know that, I'll leave it up to you guys to decide if you wanna discuss that and want me to discuss it, but that came from Mr. Willingham that he wanted that on there. And so I know he's not here tonight, and I'm not sure if we want to discuss further. I did do what was directed and reach out to other counties, so I have some data on that, but I don't know if you guys want me to share that or push it to next month.
Dave wants to hear that. We'll let Dave take that, I think. Does anybody disagree with that?
Nope, I'm fine with it.
Okay, the next one is wage increases for 2025. I know we talked about this last month. We didn't make a yay or a nay or have any discussion on it, so we put it back on for this month. I'm obviously well aware of what we are looking at doing with how the budget looks, what we're looking at doing there. But I think it is still our duty to look at some sort of wage increase, or at least a scale increase, which would adjust our scale so we could change those starting wages and help with recruitment and of new employees. I don't know if you have anything to add. I know, I think you've talked to finance a couple of times about it.
Yeah, just that the importance of, we understand that we have budget concerns, but that doesn't mean we can stop taking care of our employees and acknowledging that inflation is up, CPI is up, and we recognize that your paycheck is getting tighter because the cost of groceries and things are going up. So that's the reason we're bringing a pay increase to you for 2025.
Are you bringing a number or is this an advisory?
So, there's a couple different options that we could look at. So in looking at what other counties are doing, they're doing around a 3% increase, and then total, so like a 3%, a lot of them are doing a 3% structure increase, which would be a 3% COLA, so moving your whole scale about 3%. Total payroll increase will be about 4.5% is what this, what our Northwestern region average is right now, according to the wage study that I was a part of and got back. Obviously I'm not asking for a 4.5% increase, I know we can't, that's a little high for us right now. I came up with numbers for 4 different options. I did not include fringe benefits in this one right now, so this is strictly just our wages here. So the first one, looking at doing, so there's 2 different things. If you do a structure adjustment, that is going to help us with recruitment because we're going to actually move our scales. We haven't moved our scales since 3.5 years is essentially when we last moved our starting wage. And then the other part of it besides that structure adjustment is a step increase. We obviously did get the step increases back in July, so there would be the option not to do both. Typically what I would recommend every year is that you would look at doing a structure adjustment and a step adjustment. Knowing where we're at with our budget and that we did get that step increase in July, we could look at just a structure adjustment, which would still move everybody, but it would move that starting wage, so we would have those higher wages attainable for recruitment. So with looking at just a 1.5% structure adjustment, it would be about $100,000 without fringe benefits. If you looked at a structure adjustment of 2%, it would be about $132,000. The other numbers I can share if you want, but those ones I had originally calculated a while ago before this budget talk, which was doing those structure adjustments with a 1-step increase. So a 1.5% structure adjustment and then a 1-step, or a 2% structure adjustment with a 1-step, and those were $180,000 and $212,000. So being mindful of where we're at, I would recommend that we move our structure and not step our employees.
And what was that number? 130?
132 for a 2% structure COLA adjustment, 132,000. The other thing when we do a structure adjustment, our employees, we have a few employees who are red circled, so they're at the top of the scale, but they would also receive an increase because we'd be moving that whole structure, so they would receive that as well.
So is that gonna get us back into that terrible place where if we don't do a step, that we're gonna be clogged up again?
I mean, it could a little bit, but you're moving the whole structure, so they're gonna get that percentage increase off of what? So they're gonna stay, like, they're gonna move with that scale.
We're still gonna have all these people on step 1, right?
Well, right now we only have like new employees on step 1 because of the July 1st increase.
So next year we're gonna have a whole bunch of new employees plus the old employees and stuff. I mean, I get what you're saying, but also we tried really hard in July to get rid of the clogging. What's your opinion on that?
Yeah, I think we fixed a little of that back then.
So we don't wanna get, I mean, we don't foresee what's in the future, but I don't wanna get clogged back up and have that problem happen again. So what happens if you do a little of each? What is your numbers with the little of each?
Well, 1.5% COLA with a 1-step is 180,000. A 1% COLA with a 1-step is probably like, I don't know, what, 130 maybe? But then you're only moving your starting wage by 1%, which is what?
It's not worth it.
No.
Thoughts, Mr. Mayor?
I'd be okay with the 2%.
Keep in mind, anything we pass here has to come out of contingency, being that this budget passed with top board.
Yeah.
2% COLA structure, is that how you?
The structure, yeah.
Yeah.
I'm okay with that.
I'm not seconding it. You can if you'd like. If that's what you're waiting for, I'm just gonna help move it along.
Yeah, second. All in
Got that
favor?
right?
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
Aye.
So we don't have, we have a majority, so. And that gets passed to finance.
It should probably be, yeah, it should probably go to finance next week and then to the full county board as a resolution.
So you do.
Okay, next up, I have amend ad hoc interviewing committee ordinance. So this was in your packet that I had sent out. So this came out of the finance committee, I don't know which meeting. One of the recent meetings they had to save some of the money. So right now we're interviewing a lot. I'm doing anywhere between 1 to 3 interviews per week. We include 2 board members in them, and it's at a $40 per diem for each board member. So they made the recommendation that I bring to personnel to, they had said to abolish the ad hoc interviewing committee, and I'm recommending modification of the ad hoc interviewing committee. I still feel that we should have an ad hoc interviewing committee for our appointed officials, because our appointed officials are going to be those department heads and they report to the board. So I think it would be in the best interest that the board is involved in those interviews, or that committee is involved in the interviews when they're the ones that are overseeing that position. Every other interview that I've been in with just, more of those frontline staff or those non-appointed officials, a lot of the board members, while it is helpful to have them in there, they definitely leave it up to the department head to do. This would also help us with, we can interview a lot faster, we can post jobs until they're filled, so as applicants come in, the department head and myself could be interviewing them. It would speed up that process as well. So you'll see in front of you, I had a resolution. So I have the ad hoc committee is only in place for the hiring of appointed officials as outlined in section 2-119 of the Rusk County ordinances. So then that would strike what was 1 and 2. And then, I said it will consist of 1 member from personnel, 1 member from the oversight committee, the board chair or their designee, administrative coordinator, and human resources manager. And the committee shall forward the committee's recommended candidate to the full board for appointment. So again, that would be for your appointed officials, your department heads.
So we crossed off the department heads in like line 18.
Because if you look up to line 4, it's the ad hoc committee is only in place for the hiring of appointed officials, which those are our department heads. So line 18 wouldn't be applicable because that's the only reason the ad hoc interviewing committee is in place. Does that make sense?
It does, so I was just wondering why is that crossed off when you just said that.
So on line 21, it says administrative coordinator and human resources manager. The or is crossed off. So my question would be, why is the or crossed off, and why would the admin coordinator be involved in this interview? Because it really isn't that kind of your.
I mean, hiring would be under me, but the admin coordinator would have, has oversight and direction, I would say, over department head. I mean, technically not oversight, but has the direction over the department heads. And I think it's important that, right now, that's what we do with department heads. It is both of us that are in there for department heads.
Well, you either need 3 or 5. I mean, if you wanna have both, an odd number.
Gotcha. Okay.
And then,
And I put the board chair or their designee in case the board chair can't make it, they can assign somebody to.
we don't have to put in here that it has to pass the board by 2/3 vote, correct? Because that's already stated somewhere else.
It's in statute, yeah.
Change it on.
No, to be appointed.
Oh, sorry, yeah.
I'll make the motion to accept the changes to the ad hoc interviewing ordinance.
Second.
What's that, Sharon?
I said all in favor,
Aye. Yeah, speak up, man.
all opposed. Thank you.
Okay, so next up, this plays right into this, okay? So since we're amending the ad hoc interviewing committee, we have stuff in our personnel handbook that talks about the ad hoc interviewing committee. So number 7 is approve changes to chapter 4 of the Rusk County Personnel Handbook, recruitment, selection, affirmative action. So there's a resolution attached to that one as well. The resolution that would be passed around for this one just says that we would make the changes to chapter 4 to the language. I also sent this out to you guys ahead of time too. If you look in section 2, I took out with the approval of the personnel committee because we're not having that ad hoc interview committee. So essentially HR is who's posting the job positions, which is currently what happens now. Promotional opportunities, so a promotion shall be approved by the department head and human resources manager and typically shall not be required to go through the established interview process. That's currently the process that we follow right now with promotions is, if we are looking to promote somebody, we don't always post that job externally and put them through the interview process.
What do you decide in that goal?
Yeah, but obviously if that was being promoted to a department head, we would have to have the ad hoc interviewing committee and go to the board to be appointed if we were promoting somebody to a department head, because that would fall under the ad hoc interviewing committee in the ordinance. So it would just be like promoting the maintenance, when we promoted the maintenance tech to the maintenance manager, or something like that. Open recruitment, so again, just crossing off the personnel committee, so recruitment efforts may be directed to external sources. If a position is not filled by an internal candidate, if it is determined it is in the best interest of the county to consider a pool of both internal and external. That's actually what we do now anyway. So that's not anything really new, that's the current practice. And then open recruitment, I just put instead of that we will run it for 2 weeks, we can choose to run it until it's filled. So essentially we can put on our postings, it's open until filled, or if we wanted to, we could set a date of when the posting closes. So that's what that describes in B. And then I believe we go all the way to section 6 on page 3, which talks about the interview process. So, excuse me, that's just changing to match up with the ordinance. So you're crossing off A, because the HR manager is no longer coordinating with the committee chair and the department head to select the interview panel members because there is no interviewing committee. And then HR and department head shall reach consensus and they make that final selection. And I didn't put what's in the ordinance back into our handbook because I don't think we need to have it in 2 spots. So the ordinance talks about the department heads, that's why they're not in here. And then section 7, just a really little error right now. It says the HR manager will conduct reference checks. I changed that to may. We don't always conduct reference checks because a lot of companies are going to, they're not giving any information anyway besides their name and date of hire. And then on the last page under that D status change, if a current casual employee is selected for a regular allocated position, the employee, it did say is considered a new employee from the date of status change. I feel to promote people to come here, especially, like maybe in our jail as a reserve deputy or some of those on-call EMT, ER positions, we should be maintaining their date of hire, not starting them as a new hire when we promote them.
Do you have to do the same position?
No, we don't have that specified, and I honestly wouldn't specify that because if anybody casual in any position is gonna take one of our full-time positions, I would think that that would be a benefit to them, that we would give them those years of service for their date of hire. But honestly, really wouldn't change much. So those are the changes that I have for that one.
I'll move to approve the changes.
Does that get forwarded to county board, right?
Yeah, right? Yeah.
Yeah, it does. I'll second.
All in favor?
Alright.
Opposed? Okay. Next.
So the next one that I have is approve changes to chapter 2 of the Rusk County Handbook, employment categories and performance evaluations. Again, the resolution, if you guys do so move to pass this, would just say that we're updating that chapter. This one I also sent out, I think this one was sent out a little later, I apologize for that. The main thing why I have this in place is, well, number one, our chapter 2 is employment categories and performance evals. We don't have anything in there about performance evals, so right on top I have that crossed off. but I really wanted to incorporate a compensation policy. I've heard a lot of our board members talk time and time again about how we have no like policy in place of how we do wage increases. We don't know like where we hire people at, and how do we know if you're at step 1 through step 10 or step 20, or there's no consistent practice. I shouldn't say that. I might have consistent practice and we might know what we do, but nothing's written down, and it leads to a lot of confusion with new board members and department heads, all of this. So I worked with a couple other counties who have a compensation policy in place and put something in place, and it fits into this employment categories. So section 1 is the policy of Rusk County to administer and maintain an employment category system and corresponding compensation levels. So the county shall provide salaries and benefits on the basis of external competitiveness and internal equity and within the financial limits that are established. So in employment categories, I just wanted to note that all full-time and part-time positions within Rusk County are placed on our compensation schedule, with the exception of those positions covered under union contract. And then typically our contracted positions, our temporary positions, our seasonal positions, and our casual positions are also not on the compensation schedule, and they're set by resolution. Positions placed on the schedule are based upon the external market rate of similar positions and then based upon internal alignment. And I have that the county will typically partner with a third-party compensation consultant, so that's Carlson Detman, to establish new employment categories, their grade and wage. So again, everything that we're kind of doing, but putting that into that policy. For section 4, pay rates. So pay rates so this is where I kind of added a bunch of stuff that we are doing, but to actually put this into a policy. Also, if we're not having the ad hoc interviewing committee and you guys as department or as board members aren't in there, hopefully this would make you feel more comfortable at having this compensation policy, that you guys are still in charge of where our new hires are coming in on, how raises are done, all of that. So pay rates for new hires. So I have on here that placement of new hires with the minimum skills and qualifications would normally be hired at that step 1. A new hire may be hired up to step 10. Step 10 is our control point, which is like the average that they described it as. So step 10 on our scale is like the average in the surrounding areas. But they only may be hired up to that with the approval of the HR manager under the following conditions. So it specifically lists conditions on when you could go up to that. That would either be the new hire has a level of experience or skill set that's immediately usable, or the market conditions demand that higher starting wage. A new hire should not ever be brought in above step 5 or above step 10 unless there are extenuating circumstances. A new hire requested to be brought in above step 10 shall require the approval of, I put on here, the finance committee. A lot of our stuff goes through a lot of committees right now, and it takes a lot of time to get anything done. It's going through oversight, then personnel, and then finance, and then the full board. So looking at what other counties do, and I did look at what other counties are doing with administrative coordinators, so it's not like these counties have administrators. So saying that above a step 10, finance would need to approve that level and that financial impact. So flipping to the next page, talking about wage adjustments for your annual employees. I have that employees may be eligible for a wage adjustment each year, depending on the county's ability to pay and the market conditions. I've talked in here, so it's spelled out that there are 2 different components to that administering that pay, and that would be your structure adjustments and your step adjustments. The first adjustment results in a pay change for all employees. That's that structure adjustment. So this is reviewed and considered annually by the county and is used to keep the pay structure competitive with the target market. When the county determines it is necessary to age that structure forward, a certain percentage would typically be applied across the board. Employees would experience a change in pay while remaining on their existing step with this first type of adjustment. And the second one would be a result in the pay for most employees would be a step adjustment. Again, it's depending on the county's ability to pay, so none of us making decisions, these are the committees making decisions. An annual decision would be made by the board as to whether to award step movement or not. Employees who are not at the maximum step, so are not red circled, would move forward. When structure and step adjustments are implemented, they would typically occur with the first pay period of the fiscal year. Employees who are on the final step of the pay structure are red circled, so they wouldn't be eligible for they would only be eligible for a structure adjustment. Number C talks about promotions, so, again, just spelling that out, what is our practice? So a promotion is the movement of an employee from a position in one pay grade to a different position in a higher pay grade. A promotion shall be approved by the department head and the HR manager, and it typically shall not be required to go through the established interview process. We always land at a million different committees when we talk about promotions. Where do we look at them for pay increases? What do we do for placing them on the scale? So I am recommending an employee receiving a promotion will be placed on the step in the new pay grade that provides a 5% increase. If an employee has been with the county for at least 1 year, the promotional step would be at least at a step 2 or a 5% increase, whichever is greater. No employee would exceed the maximum of the pay grade. If the 5% increase would place the employee beyond the maximum of that pay grade, the employee would be placed at the maximum with no additional compensation change. Any promotion, so again, trying to get rid of going to all these different committees. Any promotion requested to be brought in higher than either that step 2 or a 5% increase shall require the approval of the finance committee. Looking back, any promotions that we've done, we haven't done anything really over that 5%, we have done things over that 5%, we haven't done anything under that 5%. That is what some of our other small counties next to us have also done too, so I thought that was fair, but anything above that, finance would need to approve that increase. A transfer, so this again just spells out exactly, because some people when they're applying for another position that's in the same pay grade, they want a pay increase. This spells out that if you're going to another position that's in that same pay grade, you're not going to receive a salary adjustment. Employees wishing to transfer would typically go through the interview process, because usually they're going to be transferring to another department. So we would have them go through. A demotion is the movement of an employee from one pay grade to a lower pay grade. An employee who's demoted for involuntary reasons unrelated to performance will retain their current rate of pay. This will make more sense in a minute here, what I'm saying here. And then when the next annual step adjustments are made, they would be placed onto the next step that provides an increase. An employee who requests and is granted a voluntary demotion, so they're asking to go into a position, which we've had this recently, that's a lower grade, they will be placed on the same step in the new pay grade. So again, we've always had a lot of discussions, where are they gonna go, where are they gonna be placed? Making this consistent across the county, a demotion would be placed in the same step at that new pay grade. So example, they're on grade 12, step 3, they're moving down to a position in grade 9, they'd be placed on step 3. And those requesting a demotion will typically go through an interview process. Temporary assignments, so temporary appointments, what we've always done is put them at step 1, so I wrote into the policy that employees temporarily appointed to positions of a higher employment category shall be paid at step 1 on that new pay grade. Employees stepping into the temporary position who are hourly will remain hourly, and employees who are salaried will receive a stipend that is based off of the step 1 hourly rate at that new pay grade. The appointment of the position needs to be approved by the oversight committee, so we're not just gonna put somebody into a department head position without going to that oversight committee, but the oversight committee would appoint them into that position, and we'd automatically place them on that step 1, and it wouldn't have to go through all of those committees. Compression, there may be occasions when either a new hire or promoted employee may make less than a subordinate employee within the county. In this circumstance, the HR manager would make a recommendation to finance committee for a wage review. A reclass, we see that. So if a position experiences substantial change in scope and responsibilities, the position's pay grade may be evaluated. The county will typically partner with a third-party compensation consultant for these reviews. If a grade adjustment is recommended, the change needs to be taken to the finance committee for that approval. If a reclass results in a position moving up in the pay structure, then incumbents within the role would be placed on the step that provides a 2.5% increase, is where you place them. If a reclass results in a position moving down in the pay structure, then that's where that rules for the demotion will be applied. So we're not going to decrease their pay. So that's where I said that would make more sense in a minute. So that's where I'm talking when I say an employee who's demoted for involuntary reasons, unrelated to performance. So that's where that comes into play. And then I just took out the board resolution, so I'm not really quite sure that was in there. So regular, full, or part-time employees may be authorized by county board resolution to receive annual or other pay rate adjustments. So that's within the policy that goes to county, that's in our ordinances, that's in other parts of our policy that the board has to approve, increases. I don't really think that needs to be spelled out. I know that's a lot, but I really think this helps clean up, I get a lot of department heads, hey, I wanna promote, hey, somebody wants to demote, what do we do? What are the past practices? And then it's going back and looking, and it's this, that, and the other thing. So having a clear policy that kind of states and looks at what we do, I think will help us with consistency.
I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
And one last policy, you guys today approved leave of absence policy. So this one I sent out as well, and it comes with a resolution. The resolution again would be the same thing, just that, we're making changes and revisions to the handbook. So I know one thing that we've talked about in personnel is that we need to have a better, leave of absence policy. I reached out to multiple counties within the state, and I got about 8 to 10 policies back. And this is where I took my information off of. So if you look at the attach, the only thing we had about leave of absences, and reminder, this is what I'd be talking about with the leave of absence policy has nothing to do with FMLA. So FMLA leaves are completely separate in our handbook, that's a completely separate game. What I'm talking about here with leaves of absences are those that, people don't qualify for FMLA or they've either exhausted their FMLA. So Section 6 in our handbook currently, in Chapter 6, is what talks about leave of absences. I just redlined that whole thing. Some of this information will still be in there. It's just a lot easier for everyone to look at. Redline the whole thing. Below that is the new proposed policy. Broke it up. I found a couple of counties that did a couple different things for leaves, and I liked this. So I broke it up into, the county would have a medical leave policy and a personal leave policy. So the purpose of the first one, which is the county medical leave, non-FMLA, would be to provide time to an employee who has a serious health condition, who does not qualify for federal or state FMLA, or maybe has exhausted their FMLA, which, as you guys know, we have seen that numerous times this year. So employees may request county medical leave for continued time off upon either exhausting FMLA or if they did not qualify for it. And this would they would only be able to apply for county medical leave if it was their own serious health condition. So this does not pertain to anybody else's health condition. This would be their own serious health condition. The length of leave, they may request a continuous, not an intermittent leave, a continuous medical leave under this policy for up to 6 weeks, as supported by medical documentation supplied by the employee's healthcare provider. So we would just do a little quick track, have them turn in paperwork that they have that serious health condition. We could approve them up to 6 weeks for that county medical leave. And then there is a form that they would fill out, which I did not create the form yet, but they would fill out a leave of absence request form, turn it into HR at least 30 days in advance with the reason. Obviously, there may be some extenuating circumstances that they can't get that to you in 30 days, so we would waive that. Employees on a county medical leave would be required to use all of their available leave balances, but we'd also let them use their extended leave bank for this. Right now, they can only use their extended leave bank if they have been gone for more than 5 days in a row, so eventually that would hit, or they're on FMLA. But if they were on an approved county medical leave, we would allow them to use that too. And then employees shall be on unpaid status once all leave balances are exhausted. PTO, comp time, vacation, sick, extended leave. The second leave would be personal leave. So the personal leave is to provide employees time off for personal reasons when an employee is not eligible for other leave options or they have been exhausted. So they might have ran out of PTO, they might be taking care of a loved one, they might have a death in the family, you know, maybe their husband passed away, their wife passed away, somebody very close where they need to take off a little bit more time, don't have PTO, whatever that may be. So they may request, again, a continuous, not an intermittent leave under this policy for up to 4 weeks. The employee requesting a personal leave of absence would submit a form again. The leave would first need to be, this one will go to the department head. The reason why the other one doesn't is because it's actual medical, that one just is HR. This one would go to the department head, and if the department head agrees to it, it would go to HR for review and approval. Requests not being considered by the department head would be denied in writing and returned to the employee. So employees may request that continuous leave up to 6 weeks, but the department head or HR could grant any amount of time up to 6 weeks, depending on the situation. So it's not like they would automatically just get 6 weeks. And the approvals of personal leave of absences would be discretionary. So that's consideration is given to the department, what their staffing needs are like, and determining the best interests of the county. If the purpose of the personal leave request is for time off due to an employee's serious health condition, or other reasons covered under FMLA, they would first need to exhaust FMLA or county medical leave first. So there's a chance they could exhaust 12 weeks of FMLA leave. They could apply for 4 weeks of or 6 weeks of county medical leave. And then if they still were not quite ready to come back, we could move them over to a personal leave. It should be 6 weeks. The length of leave for personal should also be 6, sorry. One area it says 4 and the other 3 areas it says 6. That would be 6 as well. So those are a county medical leave and a personal leave. And then the third one would be a general unpaid leave of absence. So this is something we have now written in. It's just, it requires a 2-week prior notice, but that's often waived. So when we're talking about a general unpaid leave of absence, this would be if an employee has exhausted all available paid leave, including their extended leave. Unpaid leave days may be granted at the sole discretion of the department head, and they're not to exceed 5 in a calendar year. Typically where we would see this is some of our new hires that are starting out within the first year, they only get 7 or 4 days of PTO depending on when they start. So the department head throughout that calendar year could give them 5 unpaid days off once their PTO has been exhausted. So maybe they don't qualify for actual, like a continuous leave. For instance, where this happens a lot is we require people who are on FMLA to drain all of their leaves, right? So somebody has a baby in January, is out January, February, March, or maybe it's January, February, has drained all their PTO. They come back in March and they have nothing for the rest of the entire year. So this kind of gives the department head that discretion to give them 5 days off for the rest of the year. So that's where that is, but it's not a leave of absence. They're just, it might be a day off for an appointment or whatever it may be. So that's what number 3 is referencing. Number 4 is an educational leave. There's no changes to that. That sentence was in our, in that section 6 before, so that stays the same. And same with number 5, jury duty. That was in there before. That stays the same. I did add a number 6, which is an unauthorized leave. So this just states that employees who are absent from work without approval and receive no pay for that duration of their absence, and they're subject to disciplinary action involving failure to report to work. An employee who is absent from work without authorization for up to 2 or more days is considered to have resigned their employment with the county. So we're not terming them if they have not made contact with us and are gone for more than 2 days. They have resigned their employment with us. Number 7 all talks about other provisions while they're on this FMLA leave of absence. So outside employment, this was in the policy before, an employee who's on a leave of absence, they're prohibited from working for any other employer during this time while they're on a leave. Continuation of benefits, this is a huge change. I know we have talked about this as a personnel committee. A non-FMLA leave of absence does not provide any benefit protections. If an employee is approved for a leave of absence, the employee's health, dental, and vision benefits would terminate the last day of the month following the employee's last day in active pay status. Active pay status would mean if they had PTO, we would be canceling their insurance and that, because we would be taking their deduction still. So this would, when they would convert over to that unpaid status. The county would then discontinue its contribution towards insurance premiums, and the employee would be eligible to enroll in COBRA or apply for portability coverage. If and when the employee would return to work after their non-FMLA FMLA leave of absence, the group health insurance coverage would be reinstated the first day of the month that follows, the return to full-time employment. That would include the same for dental and vision. The employees, shall be required to pay for all disability, life insurance, and select benefits, and failure to make the required payments would result in termination of these insurance coverages as indicated under termination of benefits. So that just says that if an employee is not paying, that we can, stop those benefits. The other conditions, just also noting that employees are expected to return from leave as soon as possible, regardless of what expiration date of the leave. So essentially saying like, hey, if we approved you 6 weeks and 2 weeks in, we hear that you're out and about and you're fine and you don't have anything wrong with you and you're doing whatever, this condition kind of applies for that, that we expect you to return as soon as you're able, even if it's not to the expiration date.
That's a lot of extra leave. I'm just saying, there's truly gone for 6 months.
I will remind you that you guys just had 2 people that
I
you
know that, that's why I'm saying that.
you gave them 9 months.
I just really didn't have choice, so. And then it becomes past practice, which then makes it impossible to.
The reason why the weeks are in there like they are, some of our positions, especially a lot of our positions have a big training period, so allowing somebody out, you know, for those 4 to 6 weeks, and anybody can definitely make a motion to recommend. I just started with 6, we could drop down to 4 weeks, you know, in each one. But there is that balancing act of when do you let somebody go because they're on leave too long versus retraining somebody and hiring and going through that whole process.
The problem is when you're doing that long, it's probably suffering and having to
What's the longest we've had somebody?
9 months?
Close to 9, hasn't it?
That's
On
close.
an unpaid leave?
Yes.
Why don't you just replace them?
I don't know, why did you guys vote that way?
Yeah, well, that's why I'm saying,
Needed to get this done here.
And I'm fine changing, the only thing the most common leave that you will see that the other counties tell me about is mothers who have babies. And you want to be mindful of what you're putting in there because somebody that comes and works for us in the first year isn't qualified for FMLA, so they would fall under like one of these leaves, so giving them like 6 weeks might be appropriate, you know, for something like that. But that's why it's for up to 6 weeks, and then it would be up to me and HR to consistently hand that out based on looking at you know, what comes into play there is definitely the position, because it's different if you're replacing a jailer for 3 months versus a social worker maybe they're covering the position, or do you know what I mean, versus covering it with overtime, or you kind of gotta look at some of that, and you look at the training period, look at the size of the department, there's a lot that goes into that. I'm not gonna lie, when I wrote the policy, I went back and forth in between 4 to 6 weeks a lot, like I couldn't decide what to put on. So.
if after 8 weeks, after you've exhausted your FMLA.
Well, it's not necessarily, anybody in the first year wouldn't qualify for FMLA. So you have to be employed for 12 months. But 8 weeks is still a generous amount of time in your first year to be gone. So if you did 4 and 4. And I think that's a reasonable amount of time for a condition that somebody might have.
I mean, how many, probably not EMS or law enforcement, but how many other, departments don't have light duty?
None of this would be light duty, FMLA leave, you
No,
know,
I get that, but I mean, if you're injured or,
that'd be work comp.
I know that, I'm just saying. back after 8 weeks.
Are you talking under the personal leave, 4 weeks?
Well, you have personal and you have county non-FMLA. So,
Cause not everybody would qualify for both, there would be a lot of people, the county medical leave is strictly for those employees that are dealing with their own serious health conditions, who've either exhausted their FMLA or they don't qualify for it.
Correct.
So that's why there's kind of two separate policies.
So is FMLA 12 weeks?
Up to 12 weeks.
So that's 18 weeks right there. If you qualify, or you use all your FMLA.
So you wanna add something in about maternity yet?
No, that maternity would fall under, if they haven't been here for 12 weeks, they would fall under the medical leave, and then we could switch them over to a personal.
Okay.
But still, after 10 weeks, if you just started a job and given a baby, 10 weeks is very generous. And then you have the whole things to go through, so you're gonna be requesting personal leaves that you don't have also.
I move to approve it.
I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? That goes to
County board.
okay. Do I have a motion to go into closed session?
I will make that motion.
Second.
Yes.
Yes. We're now in closed session?
Oh, you have to read that.
Oh, sorry.
Yep, that's
Let's see. Motion to go in closed session pursuant to Wisconsin State 19